Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about Ben from Questing Beast's amazing, shocking video that contained a whole bunch of truth about the OSR and a whole bunch of truth about the 5e, the Dungeons and Dragons 5e community. And the most shocking aspect of it is he said flat out, 5e players expect 5e dungeon masters to be life coaches. Check the link below. It's exactly what he says. And this is fantastic because I've been saying this for I've been saying dungeon masters should be life coaches, right? Like that when somebody sits at our table, we should intentionally aid them. IRL, be very intentionally thinking, how am I going to send this person away with more than they had when they sat down, right? And those are intangible things, but we live in a knowledge worker world where knowledge workers are crushing it right now. And so the intangible is the most valuable thing, quite literally. A physical dollar is worth $1. A long string of numbers is worth $16,000 right now, right? Go check Bitcoin, right? And so we now very much live in a world where the intangible is where the real value is at, right? And as dungeon masters, we can heap things on people intangibly. Like we can send them away with very virtual treasures, right? Like with treasure chests, right? And that's what each session is. So I've been saying this for a long time. I've been saying dungeon masters should be life coaches, right? And what Ben of Questing Beast, and the reason why I keep pointing to him is he's far more prominent, far more famous, has far more of an impact on the D&D community than I do. He's just a bigger channel, right? So and what he's saying is, he's not saying at 5e players should expect their dungeon masters to be life coaches. He's saying 5e players do expect their dungeon masters to be life coaches, and I 100% agree. That expectation is there. And the other thing that I want to just talk about here is, let's stop having old conversations, right? There is no more conversation of whether a dungeon master should be a life coach. That conversation is over as of Ben from Questing Beast's declaration of it, right? He's like, it doesn't matter if they should be. It's the expectation of the majority of players when they sit down. The 5e community expects dungeon masters to be life coaches. So whether you want to embrace that or not, that's the reality. If you play Dungeons & Dragons 5e, there is an expectation that you sit down as a player and you're going to be sent away with good, sound life advice, right? I've been saying this for 3 years. He's saying that 5e players are expecting this. This expectation is very real, right? And so that's why I keep talking about this. I'm just so shocked to finally have some prominent figure publicly state 5e players expect dungeon masters to be life coaches. And that's not even Ben saying that. That's him reading a prominent other subject matter expert on D&D and walking away with that and it's just increasingly, this is where we're at, right? Like, so let's skip the should be question. It is an expectation, right? So the only question is, how do you meet it, right? And because you don't want to be that sad sack who's out there like, oh, well, your expectations are wrong. Let me complain about it or tell you why you shouldn't want what you want, right? You don't want to be that guy, right? I'm not that guy. I look at the world, see the shape of it, try to change it, or accept it and go forward. But right now, there's a very real expectation from players that their dungeon master is a life coach. Okay, so how did we get here? Why are there literally millions of people looking at dungeon masters to give them life advice, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, it's 100%, in my humble opinion, the fault of every psychologist in America. There you go. That's where the blame falls. All right. There's an old saying in business, which is you're leaving money on the table, okay? Right now, psychology as a discipline is doing the inversion of that. They are taking all the money, and psychology is being paid extremely well by the American wealth class, right? The one percenters. They are paying psychologists nonstop at extremely high rates, $200 to $600 an hour generally, right? And they're getting what they want. They get to sit on the couch. They get 6 months to 2 years to solve a simple, small problem, but it's comfortable, right? And for the wealth class, the money doesn't mean anything. It's nothing. It's just part of their. It doesn't really mean anything. Okay, all right. So psychology is doing the opposite. Okay, they're getting all the money. They're leaving no money on the table, right? But what they are leaving on the table is credibility, usefulness, and goodwill. Okay, really, I think the vast majority of Americans think like I do about psychology. First of all, there's entire families who, they will, and you can debate me, but there are this isn't debatable. There are a significant number of families where if you like Sopranos covered this, like he had to very carefully hide the fact that he was going to a psychologist because many Americans think the only people who go to psychologists are broken. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm saying this is what people think, right? This is very much believed by many American families today, that if you even say to anybody in your family, right, I'm going to a psychologist, they're like, well, what's wrong with you, right? Like, how are you broken, right? How are you fundamentally broken? How are you pitifully broken? How are you pathetically broken? Like, what's wrong with your brain, right? And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying they should say that. I'm saying they are, right? Because I'm sick of the old conversations. I don't want to debate whether it's right or not. I'm telling you it's a fact, right? It is a fact that many American families, there's no discussion of going to a psychologist, and psychologists have built this up. They've done nothing to fix their reputation, right? Now, I have gone to a psychologist, right? So I'm not a perfect person, and there are times where, where there was a period where I needed help to kind of adjust, right? And so I went to a psychologist. And when I went, I found that every single stereotype that Hollywood had told me was true, okay? It was $200 an hour, right? I asked, and I asked questions. I had a discussion with the psychologist. I think I met for about 8 sessions, right? And what I found, which was 1,600 hard-earned U.S. dollars, right? Right out of my pocket, right? This was years ago, it's probably 10 years ago, okay? And what I found was that this guy was very comfortable, this psychologist was very comfortable. I would ask a question, a very genuine question that I really wanted an answer to, and he would ask me a question, right? And this doesn't work in any other industry, right? Like, you don't, like, it's just, it doesn't, you don't go to McDonald's and say, how much is the cheeseburger? And they're like, how much do you think it should cost? And, and then you're like, hey, I need a real answer to that. What do you think of your mother and your father? Like, you're like, and so every, there were questions about my parents, and there was questions to my questions. And when I said, hey, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere, how long does this usually take? He said, oh, this usually takes 8 to 24 months, right? And I was like, well, thank you very much, but I ain't got time. I literally don't have the time and the money, right? And so I stopped going, right? And I very much believe what most Americans believe. I don't believe that I think it's a stigma that if you go to a psychologist, I do think you perceive that you're broken. I don't think that everybody who goes to a psychologist is broken, right? But the reality is this discipline has fully abandoned anybody who's not in the 1% wealth class, right? And this discipline is very comfortable asking questions answering questions with questions, and this industry is very comfortable saying this is going to take 8 to 24 months, and virtually no other industry does this. And I think they're making a lot of money. Psychology is making a lot of money, and I think they might be helping a super tiny, minuscule amount of Americans with small problems, not even large problems, right, at outrageously high rates. And so I think the vast majority of Americans have either had the same experience I had, or have had, I'll tell you right now, nobody uses psychologists more than Hollywood, and they absolutely hate psychologists. They constantly are complaining about them in their content and in their autobiographies, right? And because I read a lot of biographies and autobiographies of celebrities, right? I listen to them on Audible. Ron Perlman absolutely tore apart his psychologist, and actually spoke very highly of him. but it's so Hollywood that they didn't even understand he was insulting him, right? And then, like, if you listen carefully, you're like, Ron Perlman, man, you got rooked. You paid tens of thousands of dollars for, for the slowest possible fixes to the smallest possible problems, right? Like, you got rooked, buddy, and Felicia Day, another one, just, and the woman from Gilmore Girls, and it's just like all of them, like, these just things they say about their psychologists are just shocking, right? So here's the thing. This is why, right? When you want help with your life, generally the flow has been you go to a psychologist. You walk away with nothing, right? Because most people don't have the money to pay $200 an hour for 8 to 24 months, which means they're not a functional help. So at that point, people go looking for a life coach, right? And they are looking to Dungeon Masters to be that life coach. That is the issue. They are looking to and I think they're looking at a lot of sources, right? I think a lot of people are looking to quite literally sports coaches who end up becoming life coaches, right? In many different ways. I see this in a lot of different aspects, right? And I think people are like, I don't trust psychology to care for me because I'm not a 1% wealthy, American wealthy, right? And I think they're right. If you're not a 1% American wealthy, you don't have the time or the patience to deal with everything that psychology demands to even get the smallest amounts of help with the smallest problems. And I don't think psychology can even really help at all with large problems, right? And so that is why, right? There's really only one structure for life coach, and that's been accredited, and that is psychology, right? Now, the reality is there's been a huge market that's grown up of life coaches, right? And frankly, I'm really thrilled to see that there is a large number of actual life coaches who don't need accreditation. They can just slap a life coach on their name. But I think it's actually better, because a life coach is like, hey, I need to make your life better right away. And I'm not going to answer any of your questions with questions, right? I'm just going to give you answers. And I'm going to tell you how to structure your life better. And immediately, within session 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're going to walk away with tangible, real answers and real help, right? And so I applaud the growing industry of actual life coaches, right? And I think they're far more useful than psychologists. Now we arrive here. People who are seeking life coaches are now also saying, I can spend $100 an hour and get that life coach over there. Or there's this really, really smart, there's this really charismatic, confident, intelligent person right over there who's changing lives with narrative. Oh, wait, can lives be changed and made better with narratives? Yes! Shamans have been doing it. They've been guiding entire tribes with narrative for millennia, right? Like, so yes, right? And so the Dungeon Master is swiftly becoming the digital, actually in the digital age, we are becoming modern shamans. And people are very quickly looking us to be life coaches, because the reality is the Dungeon Master does virtually everything a life coach does for free. That's the kicker, right? Gary Gygax built a structure where you can get access to a charismatic, confident, intelligent person who almost certainly has figured out more about life than you have. And you get to sit at their table, and you get to say things, and they're going to ask questions, and they're going to give answers, right? They're going to write things in a book, just like every life coach, just like every psychologist, but they're going to do it for free. That's why virtually every 5e player is saying, I expect my Dungeon Master to be a life coach. It is what they need, right? Because psychology has taken all the money off the table and left credibility, usefulness, and goodwill. And I'll tell you right now, I think psychology generally right now, it has no credibility, no usefulness, and no goodwill from Americans. Period. End of sentence. All that is my humble opinion. I'm eager to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.